watching CramerSez.
Good afternoon, everybody. I brought some heavy hitters in here with me today. Today marks 1 month of President Trump's return to the Oval Office, and there is no denying this administration is off to a historic start. The president has already signed 73 executive orders. That is more than double the number signed by and more than quadruple the number signed by Barack Obama over the same period. These executive orders have ended burdensome regulations, sealed the border, unleashed our domestic energy sector, eliminated divisive DEI from our federal government, stopped the weaponization of government, cut waste, fraud, and abuse, reinstituted America First trade and foreign policies, and ultimately restored common sense. The president also signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, which ensures ICE will detain illegal aliens arrested or charged with theft or violence. As of today, the Senate has already confirmed 18 cabinet-level nominees, which is more than at this point under the Obama administration in 2009, and more than double the pace of the Biden administration in 2021. And today, we expect Kash Patel to be confirmed as the next director of the FBI. We are proud to announce that the president will host his first official cabinet meeting here at the White House next Wednesday, February 26th. In just 4 weeks, President Trump has already hosted the leaders of Israel, Japan, Jordan, and India. And next Monday, the president will host France's President Emmanuel Macron. And on Thursday, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will visit the White House as well. As you all know, over the past month, the president has taken questions from the press, all of you, nearly every single day, sometimes on multiple different occasions in the same day, on any topic any of you wish to talk about. President Trump set the tone on this approach immediately when he took more than 12 times the questions in his first few hours in office, as Joe Biden did in his entire first week. Yesterday, we hosted a local media row here at the White House with television and radio stations from across the country that reached up to 60 million viewers and listeners. In our ongoing pursuit of transparency on this 1 month celebration, I am thrilled to bring 3 of my colleagues and our policy experts here at the White House to further recap this incredible first month of accomplishments in greater detail. We have Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller, the Director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, and our National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. I will hand it over to them. They will deliver brief remarks on the accomplishments of this administration in the first month, and then we will open it up to Q&A. When we open up the Q&A portion, I do ask, for the sake of efficiency in this room, that you direct your question to the principal you seek an answer from, and I will call on you in this room. But first, I will let them roll through their remarks, and first up, I'll turn it over to Stephen Miller.
Thank you. It's great to be back. And I want to just thank you all for joining today, our 1 month celebration of the most historic opening to a presidency in American history. No president comes close to what Donald Trump has achieved over just the last 30 days. He has packed 8 years of transformative action, restoring this nation, restoring our laws, restoring fairness, restoring economic opportunity, restoring national security in just 1 month. No one in this country has ever seen anything like it. And when you look at the consequentiality and the significance and the transformative nature of the actions he's taking, it truly defies description. For example, in just one area, this nation has been plagued and crippled by illegal discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. It's strangled our economy. It has undermined public safety. It has made every aspect of life more difficult, more painful, and less safe. He has ended all DEI across the federal government. He has terminated all federal workers involved in promulgating these unlawful policies. He has ended diversity, equity, and inclusion in all federal contracting. He has restored merit as the cornerstone of all federal policy, restored the full, fair, impartial enforcement of our federal civil rights laws for the first time in generations. And he has cracked down on individuals across this government and nonprofits who have engaged in illegal racial discrimination against the American people. This includes making clear to every educational institution in this country that ending diversity, equity, and inclusion, ending unlawful race discrimination is a precondition of receiving federal funds. He has also saved women's sports by ending the participation of men in women's sports. He has ended radical gender ideology across the entire federal government, and he's pressured the private sector to also end and combat radical gender ideology. He's reestablished the scientific and biological truth that there are only two sexes in this country, male and female, that those are biologically based determinations. They are not based and can never be based on gender identity. That includes rooting out of the Department of Defense all DEI policies, all critical race theory, all gender madness, and once again having a military that is focused solely and exclusively on readiness, preparedness, and lethality. As I'm sure Kevin will talk about more, of course, he has undertaken a historic cost-cutting effort across the federal government, launching the first ever Department of Government Efficiency, uncovering corruption on a scale that we never thought imaginable, terminating every single federal worker that we have found to be engaged in the corruption and theft and the waste of taxpayer dollars, and already saving $50 billion in a single year, which over a 10-year period would be $500 billion. Just think about how vast and enormous that sum is. Of course, as you all know, he has renamed the Gulf of Mexico to its correct and proper name, the Gulf of America. He has renamed Mount Denali into Mount McKinley, part of a historic effort to restore patriotism and national pride all across this land. He has ended the weaponization of the federal government, restored the Department of Justice to its true mission of combating threats to this nation and keeping the American people safe. He has ended all federal censorship of free speech. This has been one of the greatest crises that has plagued this nation. Years and years and years of the federal government violating the First Amendment to take away Americans' right of free speech. President Trump has ended that, and he has demanded that all federal workers, all law enforcement, cease any effort to intimidate the rights of Americans or to police their speech. He has also restored the death penalty at the Department of Justice, including for illegal aliens who commit murder, including for those who murder cops, and including for all of those who threaten Americans with heinous acts of violence. The death penalty is back. Law and order is back. The streets are being made safe once again. On the public health front, he has launched the nation's first ever commission, the MAHA Commission, Make America Healthy Again, following the historic confirmation of RFK Jr., to finally uncover the true root causes of the public health crisis in this country, the childhood disease epidemic in this country, the spiraling rates of pediatric cancer, and devastating childhood sickness. He has finally created a situation where the federal health agencies in this country will be focused on preventing disease, on keeping children from getting sick in the first place, not sentencing them to a lifetime in and out of hospitals, suffering needlessly, when we can find ways to prevent this epidemic of illness. Then, of course, on Homeland Security. Today, it is officially the law of the land, at the conclusion of the congressional notification process, that 6 Mexican cartels and 2 transnational gangs, Tren de Aragua, or TDA, and MS-13, so 8 organizations in total, are now formally designated as foreign terrorist organizations, which means that every single member of those organizations who operates on U.S. soil is now, as a legal matter, a terrorist, and they will be treated as terrorists. This is a sea change in U.S. policy, and this means the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, along with the rest of U.S. law enforcement and the Department of Defense, are now operating in a legal reality where these cartels are recognized as terrorists. And there will be a whole of government effort to remove these terrorists from our soil and to degrade their ability to threaten or undermine any American security or sovereignty interests. Border crossings, since the day he took office, are down 95%. I think it's almost impossible to even describe the scale and scope of that achievement. President Trump, within days of taking office, cut border crossings 95%. And those few who have dared to cross are being either prosecuted or deported. They're either facing significant jail time for trafficking, smuggling, harboring, aiding, impeding, or they're being immediately removed from our soil. Either way, at the end of the process, they are going home. He's re-implemented Remain in Mexico, and he has obtained historic cooperation from foreign countries all around the world in accepting their deportees back. And he has used the United States military to fully seal the southern border with a historic deployment of both active duty and National Guard troops, resumed the building of infrastructure, he has opened up Guantanamo Bay, and he's using military aircraft to carry out deportations all across this country. And ICE is joining with ATF, DEA, and FBI to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. The criminals are going home. The border is sealed shut. America is safe, sovereign, proud, and free. We are a nation that everyone in the world understands all across this planet. You do not come here illegally. You will not get in. You will go to jail. You will go home. You will not succeed. This is the biggest and most successful change in any area of law enforcement that this nation has ever seen, and he did it in under 1 month. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Stephen. One of the things that President Trump cares most about is job creation, and it was about 7 years ago I had the honor of joining you in this room for the first time, and it looks like we've created a lot more jobs in the last month. Look at how many people are here. My estimate is about 180, but I didn't count. So thank you. It's really an honor to be back here. I think that I just want to go over a few things and then hand it off to Mike. The first thing is that the president has told us to prioritize fighting inflation. And he had to do that because, as you know, President Biden let inflation get completely out of control. And he did it with policies that made no sense. They made no sense. A lot of times people say to us, our friends the journalists, why are you doing that? But I like to think, why did they do that? Why did they spend so much money? And then why did the Fed print so much money so that we had inflation as high as we've ever seen since Jimmy Carter? So why did they do that? So we're addressing inflation. We didn't have to address it in the first term because it was always in the ones, almost always. But we're going to get it back there. And how are we doing it? Well, we're doing it with a plan that President Trump and I and others have talked about in the Oval that involves like every level of fighting inflation. First, the macroeconomic level. We're cutting spending. We're cutting spending in negotiations with people on the Hill. We're cutting spending with the advice of our IT consultant, Elon Musk. And then we're also looking into supply side things, like restoring Trump's tax cuts, maybe even expensing new factories so that there is an explosion of supply. If you have an explosion of supply and a reduction in government demand, then inflation goes way down. And then one of the things that you will want to say is, well, when are you going to see it? Well, the first thing that you'll see when the markets believe that we're going to get inflation under control is that the 10-year Treasury rate goes down, because that's how they think about future expected inflation. And so we're still going to see some memory of Biden's inflation. It's not going to go away in a month. But the 10-year Treasury before the last consumer price index had dropped about 40 basis points. 40 basis points because markets were optimistic about our ability to fight inflation. 40 basis points is kind of not a fun thing to say. Economists talk that way. I apologize. But the way to think about it is, for a typical mortgage, if that affects the mortgage rate, then it's going to save a typical family buying a house about $1,000 a year. And that's just in our first month. Okay. The second thing we've done is we've had a lot of trade talks. In fact, I was just meeting a minister from Mexico with Howard Lutnick just a couple of hours ago. And we're talking about reciprocal trade, and we're also talking about the fentanyl crisis. And so reciprocal trade is about our government treating other governments the way they treat us. We want trade to be fair. It turns out that Americans have been disadvantaged by foreign governments over and over, and President Trump wants it to stop. And the fact that struck me as most noticeable when I started to look at what President Trump was asking us to do is that last year we have data, U.S. companies paid $370 billion in taxes to foreign governments. $370 billion. Last year, foreign multinationals paid us $57 billion in taxes. We have 1/4 of world GDP. They have 3/4 of world GDP, and we're paying 370, they're paying 57. This is not reciprocal. We're going to try, or we're going to, fix it. The other thing that we've done is we've had an all-of-the-above energy approach that's led by Doug Burgum and Chris and a really large team, EPA. And we've already made so many actions that are going to affect the price of energy and lower inflation. We've opened up 625 million acres to energy exploration. We've cut 50 years of red tape. that makes it so you can't have permits. And we've even made it so that when you go home, if you get a new one, then you can take a shower or flush a toilet or read under a light bulb. We're doing that too. So finally, let's just think about like the facts that we can see right now that we think are awesome. So guess what? Small business optimism has gone up by the most ever since President Trump came in. ISM, which is the measure of what's going on in manufacturing, it's expanding again for the first time in years. CEO confidence is the highest it's been in years. And the reason people are thinking this is that our policies give people cause for optimism. And then I want to reiterate what Stephen Miller said, because it's so important, and it's so important for financial markets to start to digest this, that if, say, the Treasury Secretary or any cabinet secretary with Elon Musk is able to find some savings, say $100 billion, well, in CBO land, that's actually like about 10 times that, or maybe 12 times that, over a 10-year window. And so when you're thinking about the negotiations right now over reconciliation and thinking about, well, 4 trillion, 5 trillion, well, those numbers in terms of the savings are going to end up being small because of all the waste that we're finding. And so we're incredibly optimistic about the future of inflation and the future of our economy. And we're optimistic because we're making so much progress so far, and we already see it in market prices. And with that, I'll hand it off to Mike.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Well, good afternoon. What a month, and what a sea change in our foreign policy. In addition to what we're doing on the border and restoring American sovereignty, in addition to what we're doing in our economy and the job creation and the inflation reduction, we are bringing the world back to where it was at the end of President Trump's first term, which is a world of peace, prosperity, and looking forward and getting us out of the chaos that we've just seen over the last 4 years. So over the last month, just to name a few, I had the honor of sitting in the Oval Office as President Trump spoke with President Putin, and then immediately spoke with President Zelensky, and both of them said only President Trump could bring both sides to the table, and only President Trump could stop the horrific fighting that has been going on now for the better part of 4 years, and that only President Trump could drive the world back to peace. Both of those leaders said that in back-to-back calls. And of course, we just had our historic talks mediated by our good friends and partners, Saudi Arabia. We give great thanks to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for hosting, and sat down for the first time in years with the Russians and talked about a path forward with peace. On top of that, and one of the things that led to that was a tremendous confidence building measure that we had with the release of Mark Fogel. I'll remind everyone, the last time that we had an American released from the Russians, either we gave up a deadly spy, pressured our allies to give up a lethal killer, or we released, under the Biden administration, the world's most notorious arms dealer, Victor Bout, who, by the way, had one of his main clients for arms, the cartels in Mexico and Central America. We gave up none of that. This was released as a confidence-building measure, working with our great Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and our Secretary of State as a first step towards opening these talks and then moving forward towards peace. On top of that, we've secured, just in a month, the return of 12 American hostages from Russia, from Bulgaria, from Venezuela, the Taliban, and Hamas. Excuse me, that's from Belarus, not Bulgaria. We also had, for the first time in quite some time, we took out a senior leader of ISIS, an international financier and recruiter that the military had been trying to take out for quite some time, and wasn't able to do so, frankly, because of a bureaucratic approval process. President Trump said, take him out, and that ISIS financier and leader is no longer on this earth. We've also taken action to eliminate other terrorist organizations in the Middle East. We drove before the president was even in office. He started talking consequences for people that would hold Americans. Heretofore, there's been nothing but upside. You take an American, you get some better deal. You take another one, maybe you get a better deal. No more. There is now nothing but downside for taking Americans illegally, either as hostages or illegal detainees. And when President Trump sent a very clear message across the Middle East, but particularly to Hamas, that there would be all hell to pay, we suddenly saw a breakthrough. And now we just saw the release of yet another group of hostages. There have been dozens now, including 2 Americans that we've seen once again reunited with their families. As part of the talks with King Abdullah, he offered, and I think the entire world is graciously accepted, to take 2,000 sick children, cancer patients, and others out of Gaza as a humanitarian gesture. 2,000 Gazans will come out of that hellhole that it is, that wasteland that Gaza is right now, with unexploded ordnance, with debris everywhere, with no sewage, with no water. And President Trump has put forward a plan to deal with the practical reality that is 1.8 million Gazans now truly suffering. And then, just to bring it back to our own hemisphere, we've seen literally in the last month, after years of national security experts, the generals in charge, and others testifying and ringing the alarm bells about the Chinese Communist Party's presence in our own hemisphere, particularly in the Panama Canal. We're seeing the leadership of Panama step away from the Belt and Road program, move away from China and back towards the United States, and even enter into talks and other negotiations about addressing the ports on either side of the canal. And then finally, last but not least, we've had 4 world leaders in the White House, in the Oval Office. We've had the Prime Minister of Japan, the Prime Minister of India, the King of Jordan, and of course the Prime Minister of Israel, just in the last 4 weeks. And next week, we'll have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and we'll have the President of France, Macron. So President Trump is on what we call Trump warp speed. We are all honored to be really serving under his leadership and his vision. And truly, when we all say, and the president himself says, he is a president of peace. He is a president focused on restoring stability. I think the entire world saw what the world will look like without strong American leadership in the last 4 years. And it's truly been an honor to get us back to where we were and back on track under President Trump's leadership.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm sure you're very eager to ask questions of these very smart people working very hard on behalf of the president. We do have somebody in our new media seat today. We have John Stoll, who is the head of news at X. As you all know, you're all on X. It's home to hundreds of millions of users, a large contingent of independent journalists and news organizations across geographies and political spectrums. And at the same time, X remains the go-to platform for many legacy news outlets. And I know, as I mentioned, many of the reporters in this room use X to attract eyeballs to your work. Prior to joining X, John spent 2 decades in journalism, including several years as an editor at the Wall Street Journal. We are excited to have him in the briefing room today. John, we'll let you kick it off. And as I said at the top, please direct your question to the individual up here who you'd like an answer from. John, why don't you begin?
All right, thank you very much. I am sitting in for a thriving ecosystem of journalists, independent and emerging news organizations who do depend on X for publicity, for a business model. And so I look forward to seeing many of them in this seat in months and years to come. I also thank you, Caroline, for opening this seat up to new media. It really is a testament not only to your open-mindedness, but also to innovation, that you'd actually think about, folks that are not traditionally credentialed to be in this room, and not only have a question, but also to witness. This is a very important intersection of power and the free press. And so just the ability to witness this and be part of it, it brings everybody's game up. So thank you for that. I think this is for Mike. My question is about Ukraine.
Sure.
For about more than 10 years, I've been fascinated, like many, with what's going on. Was in Northern Europe, working out of the Baltics when Crimea was annexed, and was a lot of this came on Twitter. The platform used to be known as Twitter. Was a lot of European leaders would talk about their disappointment and solidarity with Ukraine, but when it came to actually doing something, it felt like they were passing a hot potato and sent it over the Atlantic. I wonder how much of what we're seeing right now out of the administration and President Trump is a call to Europe and the European leaders and the allies that we've traditionally had to pick up that hot potato and start doing something a little bit more concrete to win and preserve the peace in Ukraine. The second question I have is, it's related, is there's been a lot of speculation that President Trump and the administration might be manipulated by Vladimir Putin. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about the administration's posture and your confidence in the competence of this administration to go toe-to-toe with Vladimir Putin.
Well, if there's I'll take the second question first. If there's anybody in this world that can go toe-to-toe with Putin, that could go toe-to-toe with Xi, that could go toe-to-toe with Kim Jong-un, and we could keep going down the list, it's Donald J. Trump. He is the deal maker in chief. There is no question that he is the commander in chief. And I, for one, and I think all Americans and around the world should have no doubt about his ability to not only handle Putin, but to handle the complexity of driving this war to an end. And then on your first piece on Europe, I'll take you back to 2014. You're right, there was a lot of hand-wringing in Europe and not a lot of action. There's also a lot of hand-wringing here in Washington under the Obama administration and not a lot of action. They literally threw blankets at the problem. And so I'll remind everyone that Putin had some type of conflict, invasion, or issue with their neighbor under President Bush with Georgia, under President Obama with Ukraine 2014, not under President Trump 45, and again with President Biden in 2022. The war should have been deterred. The war should have never happened, and I have no doubt it would not have happened under President Trump and will stop under President Trump again. But I just want to push back on this notion of our European allies not being consulted as we've entered into this process. I already mentioned the immediate phone call President Trump made to President Zelensky. He has talked to President Macron of France repeatedly last week. President Macron convened European leaders and then is coming here on Monday. Prime Minister Starmer is coming next Thursday. I've talked to every one of my national security advisor counterparts across the spectrum in Europe. I've talked to Secretary General Rutte, the leader of NATO, the Secretary General of NATO. We have repeatedly, oh, by the way, we had half our cabinet, 7 cabinet officials, including the vice president, at the Munich Security Conference, all engaging, all listening, and all making sure our allies are heard. However, we've also made it clear for years, decades even, that it is unacceptable that the United States and the United States taxpayer continues to bear the burden, not only of the cost of the war in Ukraine, but of the defense of Europe. We fully support our NATO allies. We fully support the Article 5 commitment. But it's time for our European allies to step up. And one of the things that Secretary General Rutte said on our call was, this last couple of weeks have been a real wake-up call. And I asked him, what have you been missing the last couple of years? The fact that we are going to enter into a NATO summit this June with a third of our NATO allies still not meeting the 2% minimum, a commitment they made a decade ago, literally a decade ago, with a war on their doorstep, the largest war that they're all extremely concerned about, but yet it's, well, somebody else needs to pay. We've got other domestic priorities. It's unacceptable. President Trump's made that clear. And the minimum needs to be met. We need to be at 100% in this June at the NATO summit. And then let's talk about exceeding it, which is what President Trump has been talking about with 5% of GDP. Europe needs to step up for their own defense as a partner, and we can be friends and allies and have those tough conversations.
Great. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a Ukraine one and a Doge one. Who can talk Doge?
Stephen,
All of us. Well, so Stephen, we're hearing about these Doge dividend checks that would be 20% back to taxpayers, 20% to pay down the debt. 60% is left. Who gets that?
Well, the way that it works is when you achieve savings, you can either return it to taxpayers, you can return it to our debtors, or it can be cycled into next year's budget, and then it just lowers the overall baseline for next year. So in other words, you can just transfer into the next fiscal window and then lower the overall spending level. And that means that you can achieve a permanent savings that way, and that reduces the deficit.
And when is it that people might see those checks?
Well, this is all going to be worked on through the reconciliation process with Congress that's going underway right now. As you've seen, the Senate's moving a bill, the House is moving a bill. The President has great confidence in both chambers to deliver on his priorities. I would just take this opportunity to note that President Trump has made a historic commitment to the working class of this country to fight for major tax relief and major price relief. And cutting spending, as Doge is doing, and cutting taxes is the key to delivering on both of those promises, and President Trump is resolutely committed to doing both.
Thank you. And on Ukraine, I guess this is for Mike.
Sure.
After the president's post on Truth Social yesterday, need to know, who does he think is more responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin or Zelensky?
Well, look, his goal, Peter, is to bring this war to an end, period. And there has been ongoing fighting on both sides. It is World War I style trench warfare. His frustration with President Zelensky is that you've heard is multifold. One, there needs to be a deep appreciation for what the American people, what the American taxpayer, what President Trump did in his first term, and what we've done since. So some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable, number one. Number two, our own Secretary of Treasury personally made the trip to offer the Ukrainians what can only be described as a historic opportunity. That is for America to co-invest with Ukraine in their minerals, in their resources, to truly grow the pie. So case in point, there's a foundry that processes aluminum in Ukraine. It's been damaged. It's not at its current capacity. If that is restored, it would account for America's entire imports of aluminum for an entire year. That one foundry. There are tremendous resources there. Not only is that long-term security for Ukraine, not only do we help them grow the pie with investments, but we do have an obligation to the American taxpayer in helping them recoup the hundreds of billions that have occurred. So, rather than enter into some constructive conversations about what that deal should be going forward, we got a lot of rhetoric in the media that was incredibly unfortunate. And I could just tell you, Peter, as a veteran, as somebody who's been in combat, this war is horrific. And I think we've lost sight of that, of the literally thousands of people that are dying a day, families that are going without the next generation. And I find it kind of frankly ridiculous. So many people in Washington that were just demanding, pounding the table for a ceasefire in Gaza are suddenly aghast that the president would demand one and both sides come to the table when it comes to Ukraine, a war that has been arguably far greater in scope and scale and far more dangerous in terms of global escalation to U.S. security.
And I do have one for Caroline. Does President Trump have a bet with Trudeau about this USA-Canada hockey game tonight? And when there is a big hockey game on, is the president watching for the goals or for the fights?
Probably both. I think he's watching for the United States to win tonight. I know he talked to the USA hockey team this morning. He talked to the players after their morning practice around 10 o'clock. And I also spoke to some folks from that team after. They were jubilant over President Trump's comments to the team. I believe they're going to put out a video of that call. So he looks forward to watching the game tonight, and we look forward to the United States beating our soon-to-be 51st state, Canada. Bloomberg, go ahead.
My question is for Mike Waltz. Can you give us a readout of Kellogg's meeting?
So we're going to take a quick break here from all of this. We've got a couple of bills to pay, but we're going to be right back at it. A lot of news being made there. Like what she said, we're looking forward to the USA team beating the 51st state. We'll see if that happens. That's the 51st state, not the win. But a lot of news being made today, Sandra.
A lot of good stuff from Doge to Ukraine. Also, Emmanuel Macron visiting the White House next Monday. Also, the first cabinet meeting is going to take place next Wednesday. A lot to dig into here. And we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get right back to the White House when we return.
To have the United States.
Look out, 'cause here I
Have you always had trouble with your weight? Me too.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
With Wegovy, I lost 35 pounds. And some lost over 46 pounds.
And I'm keeping the weight off.
I'm reducing my risk.
Wegovy is the only weight management medicine proven to reduce risk of major cardiovascular events such as death, heart attack, or stroke in adults.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
CramerSez returns after this message from our partners. Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit CramerSez.com/impact for complete details. That's CramerSez.com/impact. The CramerSez Project is back.
With global news and local views.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Watching
isn't dead, and those claiming it is are dead wrong. These woke companies aren't done pushing their woke ideology. They didn't spend hundreds.
Let's see here. I finally got everything up and running. We're going to go back as soon as Fox is back in. But here's what's interesting, folks. What we're seeing here is, and I told my wife this morning, is that what we're witnessing is what happens when government operates as a business, when they're actually there for a return, not for themselves, but for the American people. And that's what we're seeing from the Trump administration. We're seeing what happens when people have an agenda to move forward and get things done. That's what's driving the left crazy. They cannot understand why Musk, the richest man in the world, would stop doing what he's doing to go in and help. It must be something nefarious. There must be some other reason as to why he's doing what he's doing. Think about that. He wants you to believe, they want you to believe, that finding waste, fraud, and abuse is somehow, that's a problem for them. And it should be a problem for you. Well, it's not. This is exactly what we voted for. For Democrats who keep asking the question, is this what you voted for? Is this what you voted? Yes. This is exactly what we voted for. No, Musk is not an elected official. Neither was Tony Fauci. Neither was Comey. Neither was Strzok. Neither was Brennan. Neither was Clapper. What's the difference? The difference is the left has been brainwashed to believe that they have to remain slaves to the system. That we have to continue to do this, that we have to continue down this path of destroying our nation so that somebody feels virtuous, that somebody else feels righteous, that they've done a good thing. I heard it best today that the Democrats, they really like to feel virtuous. And they will do anything they can to feel virtuous, but they will not actually take action on anything that they're talking about. They'll belong to the groups, they'll give some money, but they will not take action. Because they really don't believe in it. The only thing that they're doing is they're going along with the crowd because that's what's easiest. And the crowd will accept them and make them seem virtuous. This is what we're fighting, folks. You see it. We found millions and billions and potentially even trillions of dollars that have been wasted by our federal government. And instead of saying, yes, let's find more of this and let's take this money that we're finding, this money that's been wasted, let's put it to use or let's give it back to the American people. It's theirs. It doesn't belong to the government. The government has no right, no authority to say, we get a certain percentage of your work on a daily basis. We've allowed them to do that. Us. It's our responsibility to fight back, not just Trump's, but ours as well. We take you back to the, let's go back here. Let's see if we can do this. If I can get out of this here. Let me see if I can do this here right. I will probably screw this up, so here we go.
White House briefing, Stephen Miller just taking a question now.
From the media to deport as many illegal aliens as humanly possible. So thank you, and I will promise you that the full might of the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and every element and instrument of national power will be used to remove, with speed, all criminal illegals from the soil of the United States of America, to enforce final removal orders, and to ensure that this country is for American citizens and those who legally belong in this country. We inherited an ICE that was completely shuttered. We inherited a Department of Homeland Security whose sole mission was to resettle illegal aliens within the United States of America. In 30 days, the president sealed the border shut, declared the cartels to be terrorist organizations, has increased ICE deportations to levels not seen in decades, and we are shortly on the verge of achieving a pace and speed of deportations this country has never before seen. Thank you.
And Mike, there have been reports that there's some underground opposition to Trump's pick for Undersecretary of Defense and Policy, Elbridge Colby. Have you or anyone from the administration been personally lobbying senators to support Elbridge Colby?
Look, I've worked with Bridge Colby in the past. He has the president's full support to be the Undersecretary of Policy, which will be a critical policy arm for Secretary Hegseth going forward that will implement a lot of these policies. And really, that's been to the extent of it. I think there's been a lot of kind of, breathless, I don't know, back and forth in the press, but we're full speed ahead to get the president's team in place so we can implement his America First policy.
Thank you. Mike has spoken pretty extensively. Does anybody have questions for Stephen or for Mr. Hassett? Nobody wants to talk about the economy? Sure. IRS? Okay, go ahead.
This would be for either one of you. So we reported, several other outlets have reported that about 3,500 people are due to be lose their jobs at the IRS by the end of the week. If the goal of these spending cuts across the federal government has been to reduce the debt, why impose some of the deepest cuts we've seen so far at the agency responsible for raising revenue for the federal government?
Well, I think our objective is to make sure that the employees that we pay are being productive and effective. And there are many more than 100,000 people working to collect taxes, and not all of them are fully occupied. And the Treasury Secretary is studying the matter and feels like 3,500 is a small number, and probably can get bigger, especially as we improve the IT at the IRS. And so I think that it's absolutely something that is on the table for good reasons. And the point is that don't just talk about the IRS, talk about all of government. That there are so many places. I live in D.C. You maybe live in D.C. where nobody's going to the buildings. People aren't commuting because nobody's doing their job. We look back and we see that there are all these people doing two jobs while they're getting a government payroll on the payroll. So the point is we're fixing that, and the IRS is a small part of that picture.
So you're saying that everybody who's being let go was doing a bad job?
I'm saying that we're studying every agency and deciding who to let go and why. And we're doing so very rationally with a lot of support from analysis.
Because we're being told by a lot of people who have been let go at other agencies that they were told they were being dismissed because of poor performance, when in some cases they haven't even had a performance review yet because they've only been on the job a couple of months.
Yeah, I've never seen a person who was laid off for poor performance say that they were performing poorly. Okay.
Carolyn? Good point. Sure, Caitlin.
I have a question. I'll start with you, Kevin Hassett. Thank you for being here. And then I've got a question for Mr. Waltz. On these potential checks that you might send out from DOJ, is there a concern as you're thinking through this that they could be inflationary?
Oh, absolutely not, because imagine if we don't spend government money and we give it back to people, then if they spend it all, then you're even. But they're probably going to save a lot of it, in which case you're reducing inflation. Okay, so and also, when the government spends a lot, that's what creates inflation. We learned that from Joe Biden. And so if we reduce government spending, then that's reduces inflation. And if you give people money, then they're going to save a bunch of it. And when they save it, then that also reduces demand and reduces inflation.
Okay, so you're not worried about it. And
no,
Mr. Waltz, to follow up on Peter's question, you wrote in an op-ed in the fall of 2023 that, quote, Putin is to blame, certainly like Al-Qaeda was to blame for 9/11. Do you still feel that way now, or do you share the president's assessment as he says Ukraine is to blame for the start of this war?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you that I share the president's assessment on all kinds of issues. What I wrote as a member of Congress was as a former member of Congress. Look, what I share the president's assessment on is that the war has to end. And what comes with that? What comes with that should be, at some point, elections. What comes with that should be peace. What comes with that is prosperity that we've just offered in this natural resources and economic partnership arrangement, an end to the killing. And European security and security for the world. The president's not only determined to do that in Europe, he's determined to do it in the Middle East. And just a few months ago, we had an administration that had tried for 15 months. Week after week, sitting with you here and couldn't get us to a ceasefire, couldn't get our hostages out. Now we're at that point. We're back to the maximum pressure on Iran, and we have just begun, and we will drive towards a ceasefire and all of those other steps. I'm not going to pre-negotiate or get ahead of the sequencing of all of that. It's a very delicate situation. But this is a president of peace, and who here would argue against peace?
Okay, so you do share that assessment. And can I follow up? In 2017, then President Trump.
Go ahead.
Can I just follow up really
You
quickly?
just had two questions, Kate.
Can I just
go ahead.
I have an important follow-up.
Jordan, go ahead.
So, Mr. Hassett, you were speaking about tariff revenue, and you also addressed a question about the IRS. President Trump has spoken about replacing income tax with tariff revenue, especially with all this waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing cut. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you think about the China tariff revenue that we're estimating is coming in from the 10% that we just added, plus the de minimis thing, that it's between $500 billion and $1 trillion over 10 years is our estimate. And that's something that is outside of the reductions that markets are seeing through the negotiations up on the Hill. And so we expect that the tariff revenue is actually going to make it much easier for Republicans to pass a bill, and that was the president's plan all along.
And then I have a question for Stephen Miller about DOGE. So you spoke about DOGE. You said roughly $50 billion is set to be cut in a year of waste, fraud, and abuse by unelected bureaucrats. We're hearing this ironic narrative from the president's critics and the left-wing media that Elon Musk is an unelected bureaucrat and he's doing all this terrible stuff. Isn't one of DOGE's objectives to get rid of the federal bureaucracy, the deep state? And also, who was running the White House when Joe Biden was in office? Because I don't know a single person who believes it was Joe Biden.
You're tempting me to say some very harsh things about some of our media friends. Yes, it is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level. Just one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause, and it says the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers at the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm looking at the clock. We've almost had an hour.
All right, so it looks like they're going to take some more questions. We're going to squeeze in another quick break, John.
All right, we'll be right back after this. We're not sure. I think she may be wrapping up, so we'll see.
Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance. It's affordable health care.
Impact Health Sharing offers comprehensive medical services, covering preventive care, maternity, accidents, illnesses, and injuries.
Plus, choose any doctor or healthcare provider you trust with no in-network restrictions.
Enjoy the freedom and coverage you need
for your entire family.
To learn more about how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs, call 844-827-2637.
That's 844-827-2637.
Introducing Tusk.
With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing,
all while protecting your privacy.
Choose the news you trust and take control of your internet.
Join the free speech revolution with Tusk.
Download Tusk today at tuskbrowser.com.
You're watching CramerSez.
We'll keep an eye on what they're doing here and make sure that if they come back up, that we'll go back to the press briefing there. I think it's interesting that, we mentioned one of the reporters asked about 3,500 employees being fired at the IRS. And it's amazing to me that people can't seem to understand that just because you got hired doesn't mean you're needed forever. As new computer systems come in, you need less people. As more IT comes in, you need less people. That's the efficiency of getting new systems. What the government has done for the longest time is that as somebody got hired, well, you're there for life. They're lifers. They're going to hang on and get that 40-year badge so they can get their watch and their pension and everything else. And they don't care how long you have to work every day to make sure that they have a job, because that's what it comes down to. These government employees, many of them, are leeches. They're not qualified to work in the private sector, and so they got a job in the public sector, and then they're protected. And they build little systems around them to protect them and their jobs. You can't fire me. I'm part of the DEI or the Affirmative Action Plan. You can't fire me. You can't fire me. I've been here for 10 years. I've got tenure. You've got to go through a process. It's going to take you 20 years to get rid of me. You might as well not even try. That's what they've been counting on for the last several years. Well, there's a new sheriff in town. And as the official said, yeah, it's not just 3,500. We expect a lot more. The more efficient we make government run like a business, oh, you can't do that. You can't run the government as a business. That's what they've been doing for the last 31 days. How do you like it so far? Things actually getting done. Trump has talked to the press nearly every day. Last night he was giving a press briefing or talking to the press at 10 o'clock at night. Where was Joe Biden at 10 o'clock at night? Yeah, we all know. Went on through and talked about the updated IT savings, what that could do for the country and bringing down cost. They asked about Doge checks. Is it going to be inflationary? No. What he's explained is no. It's you only get inflation when the government spends more money than it's taking in. That's how you get inflation. They print more money. To you and I, if you and I did the exact same thing that our government does, we'd go to jail for counterfeiting. They don't go to jail because they call it quantitative easing. We're going to put a little money into the system, and we're going to print some money that's not backed by gold, and we're just going to ease things in. And before you know it, everybody's taking advantage of it, and we end up where we are today. $36 trillion in debt. That's how it happens. I want to remind people that the left keeps talking about the right, in particular MAGA, being a bunch of uneducated rubes. They brag about their education and that they've got all these college degrees. It's important to remember that the trash man, the plumber, the electrician, all of those uneducated people, guess what they don't have? Huh? They don't have that education hanging over them. They still have a great job. But here's the thing. It was all of the college-educated motherfuckers that got us into the situation that we're currently in. The highest educated people in our nation, the one with the most letters after their names, got us into this situation. The plumber didn't do it. The electrician didn't do it. The trash man didn't do it. The smartest, most educated people on the planet got us $36 trillion into debt. Education doesn't mean smarts. It doesn't mean intelligence. Let's go back. They're back. It looks like they're getting ready to do the Senate vote here for Kash Patel. Let's cut back in. Here we go.
App. And now, almost top of the new hour here, you're looking live at Capitol Hill. The Senate vote to confirm Kash Patel as FBI director is ongoing. He's expected to be confirmed largely along party lines as President Trump and his team continues to take shape, I should say. So, I don't know if I should say welcome back. We've been here all along, but good to have you all along on the ride with us. I'm Sandra Smith in New York, and John, it's still on to the next thing.
I think it's pretty safe to say that at this time of the day, there's never a dull moment. I'm John Roberts in Washington. Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins announcing that she will not support Kash Patel, but that's just one of 4 defections that would be needed to sink Patel's confirmation.
You're watching CramerSez.
Okay, we will go back to them as soon as they get ready to do the vote. Let's wrap up what we found in that press briefing. It looks like that they've called the press briefing off, that it's done. So let's jump into what they talked about. One of the other things that I think is important for the American people to understand is that the Democrats are continually trying to find fault. They're always trying to blame someone other than them or who they're supporting. So in the question that came up, it was asked, who started it? Is Trump worried about, taking sides, Putin against Ukraine? Who started it? And I think the answer was very succinct and very direct. It doesn't matter who started it. All that matters is that it stops. The people that are dying today aren't concerned about who started it. The Russian soldiers that are being killed by these drone bombs, these drone grenades, running for their lives, unable to defend themselves. Yeah, they don't care who started it. They just want it stopped. The Ukrainian soldiers being blown up by Russian bombs and the North Koreans. Guess what? They don't care who started it either. They just want it to stop. This is the problem that the left has. They want to place blame somewhere. We're beyond blame. It doesn't matter who started it. The Hatfields and McCoys, they fought for years. Nobody knew why they started it. They just continued to do it. All they wanted to do was fight. The left was supposed to be the party of peace, no war. And here they're the war hawks, calling for continual war, continual spending, endless wars. It's all they know. Fighting and causing problems is all they know. And they think it's for the better. They can always justify why someone should die. They can always justify why someone shouldn't be able to speak. They can always justify it. What you've got to understand is that the way that you fight that is you have to use your voice. You have to stand up against them. That's what's happening right now in D.C. That's why they're so vocal, because Trump is smacking the bullies in the face saying, we ain't playing this game anymore. And it's not just Trump. Look at the resolution of his staff. And did you notice today? I don't know if anybody else noticed in that press briefing. They were all smiling. They're all having a good time. They openly answer questions. They're not diverting one way or the other. They're telling the American people what's really happening. And the whole time, which is the most beautiful part of it to me, is they're trolling the left. Every chance they get. I think that what Stephen Miller did today, he spanked the media in the room and called them out for not doing their job. Over the last 4 years, they didn't mention anything about Joe Biden's declining mental health. They didn't talk about it. They're dishonest. They're not journalists. They're propagandists. You have to tell both sides of the story. Catherine Herridge is a great example of that. I don't know how she votes. I've watched her for years. She's bopped around from one network to the other. I still don't know how she votes. Well, she worked at Fox. Well, she worked at NBC too. I still don't know how she votes. And when asked directly, she said that's not important. I agree with her. I don't know how she votes. And her reporting doesn't tell me how she votes. She just gives the facts, the information. That's what journalism is about. That's why they do not want free speech. That's why they don't want us having the ability to do what I'm doing right now on social media. They don't want this capability for the American people. Why? Because it's dangerous. It's what J.D. Vance just said over in Munich, Germany. The left is losing their mind in this country, and a German official actually cried after J.D. Vance's speech. Not because he thought it was so wonderful, because J.D. Vance is promoting free speech. He's promoting in this speech, he's promoting that governments listen to their people, that you don't use lawfare against your political opponents. You don't lock them up if you don't like what they're saying. That's what his speech was about. The left lost their mind. They said it harkens back to the speeches made by Adolf Hitler. I don't remember Hitler calling for free speech. I don't remember Hitler saying, listen, we've got to lessen government and give the people more voice. I don't remember that. Do you remember that? I don't remember any of that. The people wanting to make the government larger. The people wanting you to work longer and harder so that they can pay for all of these extravagances that we're learning about. Aren't you done with it? I know I am. The way it stops, folks, is that you've got to become involved in your own freedom, in your own liberty. The last point that they hit on before they went to break is that Elon is not an elected official. Neither is he. Neither was Fauci. Neither was Comey. Neither was Clapper. Neither was Brennan. None of those people were elected. And I would dare say that they've done far more harm to not only our nation, but the reputation of our nation than Doge has done. Are there a few people whose lives are destroyed, who've lost their jobs? They're trying to figure out what they're going to do next? Yeah, I feel for them. I went through that 4 years ago. In fact, the entire nation went through that 4 years ago. And that's why these people are gone today. They didn't suffer through COVID. Their business didn't get closed. They didn't have to worry about where their next paycheck was coming from because they're government employees. It's guaranteed that you're going to go to work and make sure that they get a fucking paycheck. For the first time in 4 years, we're all finally in it together. Let's see here. Let's go back to Fox here real quick. And it looks like they're going to get ready to sting. It's the idiots are talking. Let's see if, is that it? I got to go here. I'm so bad at this.
And for President Trump, already undermining the critical bureau he wants to lead, already demonstrating an alarming willingness to do the bidding of a vengeful White House.
And then we have this photo of only 5 senators today at that presser against Kash Patel. What does this say about Democrats and their path forward and the message that they're sending in these early days of this presidency, Ari?
I'm sorry, but the only reason that the Democrats have Kash Patel as the FBI director is because of the Democrats. If the Democrats had not, in Donald Trump's first term, treated Donald Trump the way they did, politicizing the FBI, politicizing the Justice Department, to take it to extremes, trying to throw Donald Trump off the ballot as a candidate for re-election. If they didn't push the norms and go to the bounds they went to, including indicting and trying the former president on trying to indict him or indicting him, trying to put him away in prison on federal charges, Donald Trump wouldn't have felt the need to take this action. But when the Democrats break the norms, what do they expect? So every one of those speeches they gave this morning against Kash Patel, they should have been given against themselves 4 and 8 years ago. If they had acted with moderation and not gone after Donald Trump, they wouldn't be getting Kash Patel today.
All right, Ari, if you could stand by with us, and Martha, thank you so much for your patience sticking with us through the breaking news. We'll let you go get ready for the story. All right, thank you. Ari, if you could stand by, I want to bring one of our reporters in on a developing story today that we've been watching closely. Ari, please stand by. John?
Yeah, it was a heart-wrenching moment for everyone in Israel as Hamas released the bodies of 4 murdered hostages. The victims include an Israeli mother and her 2 children, Ariel and Kafir Bibas. They were the youngest hostages taken from Israel back on October the 7th, 2023. Greg Palcott is in Tel Aviv. And Greg, what's the reaction been so far in Israel to this?
Well, people are saying, and they are telling me, that this is one of the saddest days of the entire conflict here in the region, and that is saying a lot. It has a lot to do with the bodies of 3 of those returned, as you just noted, John. 32-year-old mother and wife Shiri Bibas and her 2 sons, 4-year-old Ariel, 9-month-old Kafir. Now, the husband and father of them all, Yarden Bibas, was captured but released alive earlier this month. Hamas claims without evidence the family was killed in an Israeli airstrike. For the nation, the plight of the Bibas family seemed to embody the suffering of all the hostages. Another reason for the sadness.
Okay, we will bop back into them as soon as they get back to this vote on Kash Patel. And I may actually wrap things up before we get to that. Other things to do. I didn't know I was going to be doing this long. One of the issues that we've seen over the last couple days, and I think that this is important to start talking about, is if you're not following the rhetoric on social media of the left, in particular, the young men, young women, they're calling for a lot of violence. That's concerning. When you have American citizens that are calling for violence, and not saying, hey, listen, this is going to be a revolution, it's going to be a civil war if you don't do this. They're actually calling for civil war or revolution. They're calling for the death of public officials. You got an Indiana man who was just arrested for making remarks about Musk, that he wanted to kill Musk. Now, we're not hearing about this in the news that much, but it's happening all over the nation. Now, that's concerning, but that's just noise until it's not. And how does it become not noise? Well, when you look at what was his name? He's the senator from Massachusetts. He was in Boston either yesterday or the day before, and with a group of people said that Boston was the center of revolution in the Revolutionary War. And it was the center of revolution around civil rights. And it was the center of revolution on the gay rights issue, gay marriage. And that it's going to be the center of the revolution against Trump and Musk. You have an elected official, a U.S. senator, calling for revolution. These words have meaning. They have weight. You can't throw them around willy-nilly. I know you guys like to do that on the left. You like to take a word and just make it worth whatever it's worth to you at the time. But the rest of us understand that when people hear a sitting U.S. senator call for revolution against the sitting president, we've got a problem in this nation. We're seeing counties across the nation wanting to secede from the states that they're in. In Illinois, you've got counties that want to join Indiana. In California, you've got ones that want to join, I believe it's Oregon, I think. They're wanting to, that may or may not be right. I don't know, I can't remember which one they're trying to do up there. But you've got this across the nation. Folks, this rhetoric and these actions that are taking place are very reminiscent of the mid-1860s, the early 1860s, the actions that were taking place, the rhetoric that was being spewed. It's no different. We're in a dangerous time. We've already had 2 assassination attempts, known assassination attempts against Trump. I still don't expect him to make it all 4 years. At the pace they're going right now, it's not the American citizens that are going to hurt. That's part of it. They're not the ones that are going to get it. It's the world leaders. It's the globalists that have put hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars into these plans over the last 30, 40 years. And now Trump, one guy, is coming in and crashing down their house of cards. So do you expect him to make it for the next 4 years? I don't. Not based on what he's doing. He's angering too many people. He's making too many enemies. I'm here for it. I got my popcorn ready. I cannot wait for this Kash Patel vote to come through, because the moment that happens, the whole gang's together. The band's ready to perform. Everybody's in place. They've had 4 years to wait for this moment and prepare for this moment. If you don't think that they're excited, I can tell. They're giddy, all of them. All of them are smiling. It's not like the Biden administration when KJP would get up there in the podium and she knew she had to lie. The first thing that she had to cover for is the dementia of the guy in the White House. Joe ain't right. Joe's sick. Everybody can see it. That's the first lie she had to tell. Imagine going to work every day knowing that you had to lie to the American people for at least an hour. You had to cover for the sins being committed, the crimes being committed behind the scenes. You had to say, no, he's not going to offer up a pardon to his son. That'd be crazy. Who would do that? And then just a few months later, explaining why it had to be done. They're liars, folks. It's what they do. Liars don't have smiles on their face generally, unless they're trying to convince you of something, trying to get into your pocket. When people are telling the truth, they don't have to frown about it. They can be very joyful about it because they don't have to worry about the lie coming back on them. That's the thing about the truth. The truth stands on its own. It doesn't need the support of anything else. It doesn't need fact checkers. It doesn't need people over here, social justice warriors watching you to make sure you don't say the wrong thing. The truth doesn't need that. The truth is supported by itself. It stands alone. Doesn't require lies about it. It doesn't require, people making sure it's not misinformation, disinformation. The truth stands alone. You have to be willing, as the American people, you have to be willing to stand and defend it. I've seen a lot of people over the last 4 years, and they're starting to come out of the woodwork now. But we've been saying it. If you're a whistleblower and you kept your mouth shut during the period you allowed these crimes to happen because you were afraid of losing your job, you're going to wait for a better time when maybe the politics are... That's why we have the problem that we have. If you keep your mouth shut because of what it might mean to you, you're no different than the fucking traitors who were doing it. There's a price to be paid for freedom, liberty. Sometimes you lose your job. Sometimes you lose your home. Take it from me. I lost both in the last 4 years. I had a very successful company. COVID killed it. I didn't stop me. I just pivoted, moved to the next thing, decided I'm going to make a new part of my life, got rid of my big $1 million home, got rid of all of our debt, said we're going to see how long we can last. I haven't worked in the last 4 years. I just recently started working. Why? Because this fight was that important. Having the $1 million house didn't matter. Being able to travel across the planet 4 or 5 times a year didn't matter. Gave up my place in Mexico. Why? Because the fight was more important than anything else that I had going on. What we're seeing, what we're witnessing today was paid for by the sweat and toil of people over the last 4 years who will go nameless throughout history. But those responsible, those behind the scenes, know what they've done. And that's what prepared the Trump administration for where they are right now. For the last 4 years, they've been preparing to roll these actions out so fucking fast that Democrats can't keep up. The globalists can't keep up. It's going to continue. They're only 31 days in. It has been shock and awe for the last 31 days. We're only 31 days in. Look at what's already been accomplished. We've got the ceasefire in Gaza. We've got hostages coming back. We've got peace talks now taking place between Ukraine and Russia. We were all told that was impossible to get taken care of. You've got to expect more from your leaders. You've got to demand more. They will rise to the occasion because that's who they are. They want you to like them. They don't want you talking about them in the streets. Saw a video of a group in California here. Things are starting to change where there were 2 groups of protesters, Antifa and all the normal people. And the normal people have they're done with it. And there was a little scuffle. It was good to see fist flying instead of guns and knives. But that's the way that you settle the bully. Sometimes you just got to smack someone in the face to get their attention. Mike Tyson put it best. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, that's what's happening now. And you've got these morons that are out there calling for revolution. You've got U.S. senators calling for revolution. You've got a U.S. congressman, Mfume, saying the exact same thing. We're going to bring the fight to the streets. Those aren't dog whistles. Those are threats. That is not, let's peacefully and calmly, patriotically walk to the Capitol. That's not the same thing. If Trump had said, hey, listen, let's go in there, knock down the doors, and let's take this power that belongs to we the people back, if he'd said that, that'd be a different thing. That's not what he said. He didn't call for revolution. He didn't call for fighting in the streets. He said patriotically and I think calmly. Think about that. There's a different message there, folks. It takes us doing what I'm doing right now, all of us doing what I'm doing right now, to tell the message, to spread the truth about what's really happening. And not this bullshit that we hear on the news that Doge goes in to find waste, fraud, and abuse. And what do they say? Their claim is, well, he's not elected. I don't give a fuck! The people wasting our money, spending our money, are not elected. You're telling me that they have more authority than he does, not being elected? You've got to be a fucking moron to believe that. We'll be back soon. Maybe we won't. The button doesn't work. Well, with that being said, I'm out of here. Thanks so much for watching. I've got to get to another meeting. But folks, it doesn't change. It doesn't change unless you get involved. It really doesn't. You have to make your voice heard, and not just at the ballot box. You've got to make your voice heard starting at home, in your school board meetings, in your state legislature. Make the fucking time. Because if you don't make the time, they will take every dime that you've ever made and they will dole it away for themselves. They'll give it to their friends. They'll enrich everybody else around them while they impoverish the rest of us. How do I know? We're $36 trillion in debt. It's not getting any better anytime soon. The only way that you stop the bleeding is to stop the spending. And let's start with the people who spend the money. So with that, I'm out of here. Thanks so much. I was going to come back. It looks like right now, let me go back over here real quick and see if they've got, they're saying that Patel is at 48-47. So 48 yes votes, 47 no votes. It is a majority vote. So he just needs 50 plus 1 or the majority of whatever the vote is. I don't know if all 100 are voting today. I don't know if all are present. So we'll see how that plays out. But currently Patel sets at 48-47. With that, I'm out of here. Thanks so much. See you again soon. Be back when I'm back.